Picture this. You're in the middle of a heated argument with your spouse. The tension is rising and it feels like the walls are closing in. Your relationship is at a crossroads. It seems like you're speaking two different languages. It's a moment that many couples face, and it's a pivotal point in any marriage. Welcome to a journey that will transform your marriage from the inside out. I'm John Golda with Solid Rock Marriage Restoration. Today we're diving deep into a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Our focus is on understanding your spouse's perspective. And now let's say that again, understanding your spouse's perspective. It is knowable. It's not unknowable. So some of us have kind of given up on that. And with this knowledge, as you understand your spouse's perspective, you'll strengthen your marriage in ways you can't even imagine. So grab a seat, open your hearts, and we're going to explore, learn what your spouse wishes you knew, insights for a stronger marriage. So the problem in this essence is that people often assume they already understand their spouse's intentions, even without asking them. We assume we understand our spouse's thoughts and their perspective. And usually we assume this to be so much more than it really is. Naturally, we might be trying to show love and respect for our spouse in a way that we understand, based on our understandings. And we assume that they'll receive that in the same way and that they see the world in the same way or similar way to how we see the world. The base problem here, though, is that men and women think very differently. We tend to see the world through our own perspective, and misunderstanding how our spouse thinks and perceives our actions and our attitudes and our relationship can lead to a lot of friction, needless argument, and stress, which tears down emotional intimacy. I think most of us have been there if we've been married at all for a period of time. To develop great emotional intimacy, you need to take your focus off of how we see things ourselves and see things from our spouse's perspective. It's so important. Before you panic, it can be done. It really can be. Maybe not perfectly, but it can be done. I know I've been on that journey. So, I frequently hear from couples, Tanya and I hear from couples that we work with in our 90-day MAA program, or from friends who just feel like they don't have a common understanding on so many important issues in their marriage with their spouse. And they frequently misunderstand their spouse and feel misunderstood by their spouse. And sometimes they're reluctant to even confront their spouse to work through it because they don't know how common their situation may be. Maybe they think it's unique or embarrassing, that there's something wrong with them, or it's even awkward to talk to their spouse about it. And maybe they're not even really comfortable with it themselves. And so it can leave things kind of swept under the rug and not addressed, and that's not good. So I can identify with this from my own marriage, to be sure. Early on, there were subjects I wanted to address but felt awkward dealing with Tanya. One example that affects a lot of men is the fact that we are visually driven. We can be distracted by images or memories of other women that we would rather avoid. We don't want to think about it, but we can be distracted by it. Sometimes that means, we want to really avoid exposing our eyes to even seeing certain things, just so we can steer clear of it. That could be movies, that could be advertisements, that could be how people that are dressing inappropriately. But let's get specific, So here's a specific example from my marriage. Tanya and I were hiring a tutor for our daughter, and most of the candidates, typically young ladies in their early 20s, some of them, all of them of good character, Christian background of the ones we were looking at, but some of them, quite frankly, just dressed too casually and in a way that I think is inappropriate, even though society accepts it. It's just a little bit too casual, a little bit too distracting. They didn't even realize it. And that can be a very awkward conversation to have with somebody. And honestly, though, I prefer to avoid that kind of visual for my son, for myself, just to keep those images away from us and to take a more modest approach. But for Tanya, it really wasn't obvious that the dress was unacceptable, by today's standards. And so for me to have that conversation with Tanya, I had to first broach the subject of how men are affected by images of women, and perhaps when women who are in their home or around them that aren't dressed modestly enough. Even if the men are not interested in the women in that way and would prefer to avoid the situation entirely, by asking the tutors to wear more professional or modest clothes when they're working around them. But it's an awkward conversation to have with somebody because they don't realize, "Oh, what's wrong with how I'm dressed?" And so it's fair to say that I was uncomfortable at a minimum in this discussion. I don't want Tanya to think somehow, that I'm wanting to desire and think about women this way. But rather I was trying to avoid it and stay set apart from that sort of temptation. And yet at the same time, feeling that just broaching the subject with Tanya felt awkward because she's not fully understanding, hey, what's wrong with my husband? Why is he like this? And so, like I said, you can kind of feel shamed, that we have to address this kind of a situation. It's like, okay, what's wrong with me? Or she's going to think, what's wrong with my husband? That he's bringing me this conversation. Why do I have to talk to these women about their clothes and their attire? And so it can be really awkward and make a situation that we'd rather avoid instead of confronting it. And what I will tell you, though, is as we engaged more, Tanya and I, to really better understand each other at a deeper level through some thought-provoking books and material that really helped us perceive things and understand things and facilitate conversations to understand each other a lot differently and more clearly as how men and women think differently. So one resource we're going to explore here in this discussion is one that Tanya and I found very helpful. It's basically based on thousands of surveys of men and women, married men and women. That means it represents feedback from an input from a lot of married couples. Not everybody is the same. Not all men and women think the same, but it gives some really good insight into how most men or most women are thinking in certain situations. And it can trigger a deeper discussion for you to have with your spouse to, even if you don't agree with the stereotypes or don't line up with the stereotypes, it can really trigger that in a way that you've talked through that and how it applies to you specifically. And so, the books we're talking about here for men only and for women only by the Feldhahns, Feldahn. So it's Shaunti, and then in the second book, Jeff joined her husband. And these books provide really good insights to facilitate that discussion I was talking about. And so I want to dive into a few of those key insights here. And so we'll start with for women only. And there's some key things that it lays out. Men need respect more than anything. They'd rather feel unloved than feel inadequate and disrespected. That's maybe a shocker for some women. For some, they've learned that already. Men may often hide their insecurity. They may feel insecurity, and they may try and hide it by presenting an in-control exterior. Sometimes men can avoid issues or stress or difficulty by checking out. And they need time to process and think about the issue, the situation, before they can really come back and engage in a meaningful way. It's not that they don't care. It's that they're seeking time to think about it. Also, men generally have a strong drive to provide for their families. Even if the wife makes enough money to provide for the family, the husband still typically feels the need to be able to provide for his family as part of being that husband and leader of the home. You can debate whether or not, that's what I love about these resources, you can debate whether or not someone should feel that way, and you can debate that till the cows come home, but this just shares with you how a lot of people do think. It just is the reality of how they think, and you need to be aware of that. Instead of telling them how they should think, you just need to understand how they do think. Imagine that, telling your spouse how they must think or should think, right? No, you need to understand how they do think. And there's a big difference in that. So another one is, yes, this one's fairly well known. Men tend to want more sex, and the wife's sexual desire for her husband profoundly affects his sense of well-being, his confidence in actually many different areas in his life, and his sense of security in the marriage. And then, as I mentioned for my personal example, men are highly visual, and even happily married men can struggle with being pulled towards live or recollected or remembered images of women. And it doesn't mean that they don't love their wives. They might not even want these images, but they can still be, their attention can be drawn. One last one I think to highlight is that, there's a couple. Men can be classified as unromantic. And truthfully, a lot of men actually enjoy romance, but their idea of romance may be different than a woman's idea of romance. And so once again, really needing to connect and understand each other is so important. And some men hold back on trying to be romantic because they don't think they can succeed or they can connect with their wives in a way that they will find romantic. And so you can see where that would, maybe they'd rather just avoid the rejection and not take the chance to be romantic. Men do care about appearance and for their wives. And so, you don't need to be a supermodel wives, but you should make an effort to take care of yourself. And a lot of men will take on significant cost or inconvenience to support you in that. They do value, because we're so visual, we're going to support and appreciate efforts that you make to take care of yourself and keep yourself in good shape, keep yourself, again, you don't need to be a supermodel. That's not the point, but make an effort. So that's kind of some of them may be a surprise to some of you, some of them may not. But if we turn the page and now we go, let's look at the other side. So for men only is, really offering insights for understanding your wife. And so once again, we'll start with kind of a list. Women need to feel loved. Even in great relationships, there's oftentimes an insecurity about your love. And when that insecurity is triggered, she may respond in ways that confuse or upset you until she's reassured. And so, sometimes when we see behavior we don't understand, we may have inadvertently triggered that feeling that she perceives you don't love her. Women are emotional. That's not a surprise to most of us, but it goes deeper than that. They're dealing with multiple thoughts and emotions from the past and present at the same time. And these emotions can't just easily be dismissed. So for men, we tend to get into one little box at a time, focus on that, finish that, put the box on the shelf and take another box down, one thing at a time. Women, so you can think of men, I've heard the comparison, men's minds work like waffles. Everything's in a little box, everything is placed and they don't touch. For women, the stereotype is it's more like a bowl of spaghetti. Everything's wired together, everything touches everything else. And it's not so easy just to say, don't worry about that, don't think about that. It is all connected emotionally, and we need to understand that as men and not dismiss it, not just tell our wives to just dismiss that or don't worry about that. We need to be sensitive to that. Now, I will also say, and I appreciate books like the ones we're talking about by the Feldhahns. It can help us men realize women are not impossible to figure out. There's usually a good logical reason behind whatever's baffling you in her words or actions. And, if there's behavior that confuses or frustrates you, it's probably signaling that there's a need she's asking you to meet, and you need to have some communication and the ability to sit down and say, hey, let's talk. What's going on? Don't just dismiss it, hide, or retreat and hope it goes away. Embrace it, understand it. Women do want security, and that goes for emotional and financial. So women need emotional security, though, and closeness, so much so that they'll typically endure quite a bit of financial hardship just to get the emotional security and closeness. So that's often misunderstood by men who think the financial security has got to be first. And so we go out and spend a lot of time working and working hard and spending more hours, and all the while making more money, and our wife might be at home feeling less and less loved and less secure that she's important to you. And so that's really important that we understand both of those aspects. Another one that really trips us up a lot, men, is it's so important when our wife is sharing an emotional problem and her feelings. Sometimes it's just about her feelings and her desire to be heard. It's not always about we should go fix it. And so the example they use is, hey, look, if she's telling you that the car is making a funny sound, maybe it's time to go fix it. But if she's sharing with you a challenge or an emotional thing she was experiencing, listen first. And if necessary, ask, would you like some help? Before you just start trying to fix it. Really just listen and show you care. And she's going to feel that and appreciate that typically. But it's always good to have the conversation with your spouse. and just say, hey, is this something you want me to help you fix, or is this something I can just help encourage you and listen. Um, and so, as you get to ask those questions and understand more, it gets easier. This is one where, for me, I'm a little flipped on the stats. So I'll come and share something with my wife that's maybe a problem I'm wrestling with, and I really don't want her to fix it. I'm just sharing how it affects me emotionally, and I don't really want her to fix it. And she's learned that, but she used to try and fix it because that's what men do. Men come to communicate typically when they want something to be fixed. And so Tanya had to kind of learn, when it's fix it, when it's just, let me give you a hug and pray for you, pray with you. And so, but it does matter to me that she stops and listens. And so I can kind of identify on that reverse script there on that item. Another one I think that men need to understand is that, yes, women tend to crave sex less often. This really doesn't necessarily have to do with how she feels about you. It doesn't necessarily have to do with her not feeling that you're desirable. It's not a sign that she doesn't want you. It's just a difference between men and women. And there are examples where that doesn't fit and the wife wants sex more than the husband. But in general, this is true. And, for each of us, we need to test these concepts with our spouse to talk through and really understand, them and what they're experiencing. So it's a great format, not only to understand what most feel and think, but to then get to the specific details of how our spouse thinks and how it affects them. And so one last item for the list for men, no matter how smart and secure your wife is, and, the way that the Feldhahns put it, there's still a little girl inside who needs to know that you find her beautiful and that you only have eyes for her. And so, don't get tripped up on the exact way they phrase it, but they're making a point. The wife, women typically want to still know that they are a focus for you and that you have eyes for them. So those are some of the main items. These are insights that can revolutionize your marriage. They offer a path to a deeper understanding, a deeper emotional connection that you and your spouse deserve. So I encourage you to embark on this journey together. Review and discuss these insights from the books with your spouse with an open heart. Don't be defensive. Discuss the insights you discover. Take that step towards a deeper and more fulfilling relationship with the one you love. So, it's time to strengthen the bonds, rekindle the passion, build a relationship that's resilient and joyful, and less confusion, less stress, less friction that's not needed. Now, please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Support each other as you go on this transformative journey. And if you're seeking help for your marriage and you want to dive deeper into this journey of healing and restoration with Tanya and me, I invite you to visit our website at solidrockmarriagerestoration.com. And, you can discover testimonials that share how we're helping others to heal and restore their marriages. You can, see a video that helps tell you a little bit more about how we work with people in that program. You can see how to get engaged with us through our free Facebook group or by scheduling a call where we can talk about your specific situation and if your situation is one that we can help with. So explore the resources, join our community. Let's see if we can help you. And your love story is unique, and we want to support you every step of the way. Thank you again for joining me. I guess the last reminder I'll put is love is a journey. It's not a destination. You're never done. So let's make it an incredible adventure for you in your life. May God be with you. Have a great day.